Opposition.
A farm with 5,000 acres, what an average farm, would pay $150,000 in carbon taxes that are already driving up the cost of food because they get passed on to the consumer. Food prices are expected to be up $1,000 for the average family to 16 grand a year to feed the average family, an incredible sum. In fact, the Mississauga Food Bank reports that some people have even said that the poverty is so grinding, they're asking for help with medical assistance in dying. We need to feed our people. Why doesn't the government reverse its inflationary policy so people can afford to eat and live?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we remain committed to supporting people get out of poverty. And in fact, we understand how difficult life is right now, which is why we have put forward numerous measures to help the most vulnerable Canadians. However, if the Leader of the Opposition is indeed sincere in his desire to help lift Canadians out of poverty, he would have voted for measures like the Canada Dental Benefit or the Canada Housing Benefit, or perhaps childcare, which right across the country fees are being reduced by 50%. But instead of doing that, he voted against it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, not only is Christmas dinner going to be especially expensive if you buy it at the grocery store, now the government wants to ban people in rural countrysides from actually hunting for their turkey. They've targeted a long list of hunting rifles and shotguns with a sweeping ban that's being widely condemned by experts, by hunters, and by First Nations people. Now, the government has admitted in recent testimony that the ban will apply to hunting rifles. Contrary to prior talking points, will they reverse this ban?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, before I come to the answer of that question, tomorrow we're marking the 33rd anniversary of the Polytechnic Institute shooting tragedy. To the families of the victims and to the survivors, we stand with you. We know that despite the passage of time, that the hurt and the loss never completely heals. We owe it to you and to all victims and all Canadians to end gun violence once and for all, Mr. Speaker, and I hope all members in this chamber will join me in a moment of solidarity. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, of course, we are all in solidarity in ending violence committed with guns. In fact, today we saw an example of the real problem. Police seized 62 firearms in Toronto. 57 of them came from the United States of America. Only one of them was from Ontario, and it was stolen over a year ago. The problem is not the hunter who in Wainwright, Alberta, or Happy Valley, Goose Bay in the East Coast is using his tools to feed his family. The problem is illegal guns coming across the border. Why won't they reinforce our border instead of attacking our hunters?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my Conservative colleague asks, what's the government doing to reinforce our borders? Investing $450 million over the last 2 years alone, Mr. Speaker, to add more boots to the ground for the CBSA, to add more state-of-the-art technology for the CBSA, to allow them to build on the progress that they've made in seizing illegal guns at the border. And what did the Conservatives do at every moment where they had a chance to support those resources to the CBSA? They voted against.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The results of their policy is a 32% increase in violent crime, a massive 92% increase in gang murders. No matter how expensive their policies are, and no matter how much they target law-abiding hunters, it's not getting the job done to protect our people. Donc, pourquoi le gouvernement ne veut-il pas?
Why doesn't the government want to help when it comes to targeting real crime instead of targeting our hunters and farmers? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what our government is doing. We have already invested $450 million to strengthen our border, to help the Border Services Agency. And that's exactly what we're doing with our legislation to increase penalties for criminals. Why won't the Conservatives support that bill if they want to target organized crime?
Honorable député de Salaberry-sur-Roi.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, COP15 on biodiversity will start on Friday, but a report has just revealed that 2,253 species are endangered in Canada. And meanwhile, in Newfoundland, the federal government is authorizing exploratory oil drilling in the high seas without an environmental assessment, right inside the right whale's habitat, which is an endangered species, along with 7 other types of whale, turtles, corals, birds, and more. Is that Canada's message at COP15, that biodiversity matters except when there's oil to be found? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I've said it before, and I want to be very clear. The Newfoundland Marine Protected Area will continue to remain protected, and we will continue to evaluate any exploration activities in the area on a case-by-case basis. There is currently a bid for tender, but no production activities have been authorized. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, COP15 is starting in 2 days. But once again, the federal government is giving special treatment to oil companies. In 2020, Ottawa announced protected marine areas off Newfoundland, areas where fishing is restricted to protect biodiversity. But last month, in that very area, they authorized 4 oil companies to carry out exploratory drilling without an environmental assessment. So, as far as I can see, fishing is forbidden to protect the seafloor, but drilling is okay. If that's not an example of special treatment for oil companies, I don't know what is. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, as I keep saying day after day, currently there is a bid for tender process with no production activities currently authorized in the offshore area. And I would like to emphasize that any proposal for production in these areas would be subject to the Environmental Impact Assessment Law. Currently, there are only exploratory activities.
For Winnipeg Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Another 3 Indigenous women were murdered by an alleged serial killer in Winnipeg, and police aren't going to look for their remains, which they believe are in the Brady landfill. Imagine hearing that about your relative, Mr. Speaker. And while the government stalls in providing resources, Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit continue to be murdered because we are a target, Mr. Speaker. Will the government provide immediate funding to stop this genocide and the resources to search for the remains of our precious sisters?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and our hearts go out to the families of the victims. You know, it isn't on a day like this that we can sit here and pat ourselves on the back about what we've been doing as a government. Obviously, it has not been enough. It is very puzzling to hear the news that this landfill will not be searched. I spoke to the mayor of Winnipeg yesterday about this and hope to get some clear answers shortly. Clearly, the federal government needs to play a role in an area where jurisdiction is a poisonous word and continues to kill Indigenous women and children in this country.
Honourable Member for Churchill.